I never thought a chocolate pudding cup would change my entire summer, but that's exactly what happened on the third night of camp counselor training when my bunkmate slid his dessert across the cafeteria table and asked if I'd do his laundry for the rest of the season. His name was Miles, and I'd been trying very hard not to stare at him since we'd been assigned to the same cabin 2 days earlier. He had this way of pushing his dark hair out of his eyes that made my stomach do weird things, and when he smiled, which was often, there was this slight gap between his front teeth that I found unreasonably attractive. I know, a gap between someone's teeth shouldn't make your heart rate pick up, but there I was, 22 years old and completely derailed by a dental imperfection. The thing is, I'd known I was gay since high school, but I'd never really acted on it. A few awkward dating app conversations that went nowhere, one terrible kiss at a college party that we both pretended never happened, and a lot of time spent convincing myself that I was fine being alone. I'd taken this summer camp job partly for the experience, partly for the money, but mostly because I thought 8 weeks in the woods would be a good distraction from my complete lack of a romantic life. Then Miles happened. When he made the trade offer, I just stared at him for a solid 5 seconds. The cafeteria was loud around us, full of the other 20 counselors in training, all talking and laughing, but it felt like everything had gone quiet. He was looking at me with these incredibly blue eyes, completely serious, holding out the pudding cup like it was a sacred offering. "You hate laundry that much?" I finally managed to say. "I despise it," he said, and he said it with such feeling that I actually laughed. "Like, genuinely, it's my least favorite thing in the world, but I noticed you ate your pudding in like 30 seconds last night and looked sad when it was gone, so I figured we could both win here." The fact that he'd noticed what I did with my dessert made something warm bloom in my chest. I tried to play it cool. "That's a lot of laundry for one summer." "I know," he said, "but look, I'm a messy person. I get dirty. I'm going to be doing laundry like every 3 days, and you seem like someone who has their life together, so I figure you probably don't mind laundry that much." I did mind laundry, actually, but not enough to turn down this weird offer that meant I'd have a built-in reason to interact with him regularly. "Deal," I said, taking the pudding cup. His whole face lit up. "Seriously? Oh man, you just saved my summer." I thought about telling him he might have just saved mine too, but that seemed like way too much honesty for day 3 of knowing someone. That night, back in our cabin, we stayed up late talking after lights out. Our bunks were across from each other, and in the darkness, it felt easier to be honest. He told me about dropping out of grad school because he realized he'd only applied to make his parents happy, about spending the last year working random jobs and trying to figure out what he actually wanted. I told him about my graphic design degree and how I was terrified I'd graduate and end up hating the career I'd spent 4 years preparing for. "Is that why you're here?" he asked. "Testing out something different?" "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe I just wanted an adventure." "Well," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice, "I think we're in the right place for that." I fell asleep that night thinking about the way he'd said we, like the two of us, were already a team. The actual camp kids arrived on Sunday, and suddenly we were thrown into the chaos of being responsible for 12 7-year-olds who had more energy than should be physically possible. Miles and I were assigned to the same group, Cabin 7, and we fell into an easy rhythm almost immediately. He was the fun counselor, always ready with a game or a joke, while I was the organized one, making sure everyone had sunscreen and water bottles and didn't accidentally eat poisonous berries. On Wednesday of the first full week, one of our kids, a tiny girl named Sophie, completely melted down because she missed her mom. It was the evening rest period, and she was crying so hard she couldn't catch her breath. I was trying to comfort her, but nothing was working, and I could feel panic starting to rise in my chest, because what if I couldn't fix this? What if I was a terrible counselor? What if... Then Miles sat down next to us and started telling this completely ridiculous story about the time he got lost at a grocery store when he was 6 and thought he'd have to live there forever. So he started planning which aisle he'd sleep in and whether the bakery section would share their bread. He told it with such dramatic flair that Sophie started giggling through her tears, and by the end, she was okay again. After we got all the kids settled for the night, I followed Miles outside. The sun was setting, turning everything golden, and he was sitting on the cabin steps looking at his phone. "That was really good," I said, sitting next to him. "What you did with Sophie?" He shrugged, but he looked pleased. I was a pretty anxious kid. I remember what it felt like. "Were you really lost in a grocery store?" "Oh yeah, for like 20 minutes. It was traumatic." He bumped his shoulder against mine. "But it makes a good story now." The place where our shoulders touched felt electric. I wanted to lean into him, to close the small distance between us, but I didn't. Instead, I said, "I brought your laundry back. It's on your bunk." "You're the best," he said. "Seriously, this arrangement is working out great for me." "Yeah," I said, trying not to feel disappointed that he saw it as just an arrangement. "Me too." The summer developed its own rhythm. Morning wake up at 7, breakfast with chaos, activities all day, evening campfire, kids to bed, and then the precious few hours where the counselors could just be young adults instead of responsible authority figures. Most nights, a group of us would hang out by the lake or play cards in the main lodge, and Miles and I were always together. People started referring to us as a unit. "Where's Miles and Reed?" someone would ask, like we were one entity. I tried not to read too much into it, but then there were these moments that felt like maybe, possibly, I wasn't imagining the tension between us. Like the time we were playing Capture the Flag with the kids, and we both went for the flag at the same time and ended up in a tangle of limbs on the ground, laughing, and his hand was on my waist, and his face was inches from mine, and for a second, just a second, everything else disappeared. Or the night we were both on late duty and ended up sitting on the dock at midnight, our feet dangling in the water. And he told me about his ex-girlfriend and how he'd realized that he'd been going through the motions of the relationship without ever really feeling it, and I'd said, "I know what you mean," without thinking, and he'd looked at me with this curious expression and asked, "Do you?" And I'd panicked and changed the subject. I was being a coward, basically. But the thing about realizing you have feelings for someone is that it makes you hyper-aware of all the ways you could ruin things. Miles was my bunkmate, my co-counselor, my friend. We had 6 more weeks of summer left. If I said something and he didn't feel the same way, I'd have to spend 6 weeks in awkward proximity to my own rejection. So I kept my mouth shut and did his laundry, and pretended that the way my heart sped up when he smiled at me was totally normal friendship behavior. Then came the night of the counselor talent show. It was a camp tradition, apparently. The kids were having their own talent show the next night, and we were doing a practice run to get ideas and also just blow off steam. I hadn't planned to participate. I was happy to watch from the audience. But Miles had other ideas. "Come on," he said, grabbing my hand and pulling me toward the stage area we'd set up in the lodge. "We're doing something." "We are absolutely not," I said, but I let him pull me anyway because I was weak and his hand was warm around mine. "We're lip-syncing," he announced. "I already signed us up." "Miles." "No." "Miles, yes." He was grinning at me, excited and mischievous, and I knew I was going to cave. "It'll be fun, trust me." So that's how I ended up on a makeshift stage in front of all the other counselors, lip-syncing to some pop song while Miles danced around me with absolutely no self-consciousness whatsoever. He was terrible at lip-syncing, kept laughing and missing words, but he was having so much fun that it was impossible not to get caught up in it. At one point, he grabbed my hands and spun me around, and everyone cheered, and I forgot to be self-conscious and just let myself enjoy the moment. When the song ended and we took our dramatic bows, I was breathless and happy and more alive than I'd felt in months. We stumbled off the stage together, and Miles threw his arm around my shoulders. "See?" he said. "That was fun." "That was humiliating," I said, but I was smiling. Same thing. We watched the rest of the show together, squeezed onto one of the benches, his arms still around me. It felt natural, comfortable, like we'd been doing this forever. I let myself sink into it, into the warmth of him next to me and the sound of his laugh and the way he'd lean over to whisper commentary about the other acts directly into my ear. Later, much later after the show ended and people started drifting off to bed, Miles and I walked back to our cabin slowly. The night was clear and full of stars, and neither of us seemed in a hurry to get inside. "Can I ask you something?" Miles said as we reached our cabin steps. My heart immediately started pounding. "Sure." He sat down on the steps, and I sat next to him. He was quiet for a moment, looking out at the dark shapes of the other cabins and the trees beyond. Then he said, "Earlier, when we were on stage, did that feel like something to you?" I couldn't breathe. "What do you mean?" "I mean..." He ran his hand through his hair, that gesture I'd memorized. "I keep having these moments with you where I think maybe I'm not imagining things, but then I talk myself out of it because I don't want to be that guy who assumes, you know? But tonight, when we were up there, and everyone was cheering, and I was looking at you, I felt something. And I don't know if you felt it too, or if I'm completely reading this wrong." I should have said something. This was the moment. He was being brave and vulnerable and honest, and all I had to do was tell him the truth. But fear is a powerful thing, and I'd spent so long protecting myself that the words stuck in my throat. "Miles," I started, and then stopped. He looked at me, really looked at me, and I could see the hope in his eyes and the fear too, the same fear I was feeling. "It's okay if you didn't," he said quickly. "It's okay if this is just friendship for you. I don't want to make things weird, I had to ask." "No, it's not that," I said. "I did feel it. I do feel it. I've been feeling it basically since you offered me that pudding cup." His expression transformed, cautious hope blooming into something brighter. "Really? Really?" I said. "I've been trying not to because I didn't want to mess up the summer or make things awkward, but yeah, I like you. Really like you." "Oh, thank God," he said, and then he was laughing, and I was laughing, and somehow we'd moved closer together on the steps. "I've been losing my mind. Do you know how many times I've almost said something? I literally invented the laundry trade just to have an excuse to talk to you more." "Wait, what?" "I don't actually hate laundry that much," he admitted. "I mean, I don't love it, but it's not my least favorite thing in the world. I just saw you at breakfast and thought you were cute and needed an in." I shoved him lightly. "You manipulated me with dessert?" "I courted you with dessert," he corrected. "There's a difference." "You're ridiculous." "Yeah," he said, softer now. "But you like me anyway." "I do," I said, and it felt amazing to say it out loud, to stop hiding. "I really do." He reached out and took my hand, threading our fingers together. "So what now?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "I've never really done this before. The whole being with someone thing, especially not someone I see literally all the time." "Me neither," he said. "I mean, I've dated, but never a guy, and never in a situation where we share a bunk room with 12 other people nearby." He paused. "We should probably figure out some ground rules." "Ground rules?" "Like, we should probably keep this between us for now," he said. "Not because I want to hide it, but because camp can be weird about counselors dating, and I don't want anyone to give us a hard time or split us up." "That's probably smart," I agreed, even though part of me wanted to shout it from the rooftops. "And we should take things slow," he continued. "Get to know each other in this new way. No pressure." "Slow," I repeated. "I can do slow." He smiled at me. that smile with the gap in his teeth that I loved. Good. We sat there for a while longer, holding hands, talking about everything and nothing, about what we wanted, what scared us, what this might look like. It felt important, laying this foundation. When we finally went inside, we were both exhausted but happy. That night, lying in my bunk across from his, I whispered, "Miles? Yeah, I'm really glad you hate laundry." I could hear the smile in his voice when he answered, "Best trade I ever made." The next few weeks were probably the best of my life. We kept things quiet like we'd agreed, but that almost made it better, like we had this secret world that was just ours. During the day, we were Reed and Miles, the counselors from Cabin 7, but in the stolen moments, we were something more. Late-night conversations on the dock, hands brushing when we walked back from the campfire. The way he'd catch my eye across the dining hall and smile, and I'd know he was thinking about me the same way I was thinking about him. Our first kiss happened during a thunderstorm. It was a free afternoon, and the kids were all in the main lodge watching a movie while the counselors took turns supervising. Miles and I had drawn the short straws for first shift, so we were stuck in the lodge while rain pounded against the windows and thunder rolled across the lake. The movie was loud, some animated thing about talking animals, and all the kids were completely absorbed. Miles leaned over and whispered, "Want to check on the cabins? Make sure nothing's leaking." It was a transparent excuse, but I nodded anyway. We told the other counselor on duty where we were going and headed out into the storm. The rain was warm and we were both soaked within seconds. We checked our cabin first, which was fine, and then we just stood there on the porch, watching the rain come down. "This is nice," Miles said. "The storm, I mean." "Yeah," I agreed. I loved storms, the way they made everything feel electric and alive. He turned to look at me, water dripping from his hair. "Reed?" "Yeah? I really want to kiss you right now." My heart stopped and started again. "Yeah?" "Yeah." He stepped closer. "Is that okay?" Instead of answering, I closed the distance between us and kissed him. It was soft at first, tentative, both of us figuring out how we fit together. Then his hands came up to cup my face, and I grabbed the front of his wet shirt and it deepened into something that made my knees weak. He tasted like rain and the grape soda we'd had at lunch. And when we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard. "Wow," he said. "Yeah," I agreed. We kissed again and again until we were both shivering from the combination of wet clothes and adrenaline. Finally, reluctantly, we pulled apart. "We should get back," I said. "We should," he agreed, but neither of us moved. Eventually, we did make it back to the lodge, looking like drowned rats. The other counselor took one look at us and raised an eyebrow, but didn't say anything. The kids didn't notice at all, too engrossed in their movie. Miles and I sat at the back of the room, not quite touching, but close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from him, and I felt like I might float away from sheer happiness. After that, we stole kisses whenever we could. Behind the equipment shed, in the woods during evening walks, once, daringly, in our cabin during afternoon rest period when all the kids were supposedly napping and we were supposed to be reading quietly. It felt like being teenagers, sneaking around, and it was thrilling and terrifying and perfect. But the thing about secrets is they get harder to keep the longer you hold them. We started getting sloppy, standing too close, looking at each other too long. I caught some of the other counselors giving us curious looks. And then, one night at the campfire, everything almost fell apart. We were doing the weekly campfire songs and stories, all the counselors and kids gathered around the flames. Miles was sitting next to me, and at some point, without thinking, I'd let my hand rest on the bench between us. He'd covered it with his own, just for a moment, a brief touch of reassurance. But one of the other counselors, Jake, saw. I watched his expression change, saw the moment of recognition, and my stomach dropped. After the campfire ended and the kids were in bed, Jake cornered us outside our cabin. "So," he said, looking between us, "how long has this been going on?" Miles and I exchanged glances. "What do you mean?" I tried. "Come on," Jake said. "I'm not blind. You two have been attached at the hip all summer, and I just saw you holding hands at the campfire." My mind raced, trying to figure out if this was going to be a problem. Jake was nice enough, but I didn't know him well, didn't know how he'd react. Miles, braver than me, just said, "A few weeks. We were trying to keep it quiet." Jake nodded slowly. "Does anyone else know?" "No," I said. "And we'd like to keep it that way if possible. We don't want it to become a thing." "Hey, I get it," Jake said, holding up his hands. "Your business is your business. I'm not going to say anything. I just wanted you to know that you're not as subtle as you think you are." He smiled. "For what it's worth, you guys are cute together." After he left, Miles and I sat on our cabin steps in silence for a moment. "Well," Miles finally said, "that was terrifying." "Yeah," I agreed. My heart was still pounding. "But also kind of a relief," he added. "Like at least one person knows and it's okay." He was right. It did feel like a relief, like we could breathe a little easier. "We should probably be more careful, though," I said. "Probably," he agreed. Then he grinned at me. "Or we could just tell people." "Miles, I'm serious," he said. "We only have 2 weeks left of camp. What's the worst that could happen? Someone tells the camp director, 'We're both adults. We're not breaking any rules.'" "We're not?" I asked, uncertain. "I checked the counselor handbook," he admitted. "There's nothing in there about counselors dating each other. It's just generally frowned upon because it can create drama. But we're not dramatic people." I laughed, despite my nerves. "You literally made up an excuse about hating laundry to get my attention." "That was romantic, not dramatic," he insisted. "There's a difference." I thought about it. About not having to hide anymore, about being able to hold his hand at the campfire or sit close to him at meals without worrying who might see, about being honest. "Okay," I said. "Let's tell people." "Really?" "Really," I said. "But maybe not like an announcement, just we stop hiding." "I can work with that," he said, and kissed me right there on the cabin steps where anyone could have walked by. The next day, we didn't make a big deal out of it, but we didn't hide either. We sat together at breakfast, closer than strictly necessary. We held hands, walking to the lake. When someone asked if we were together, we said yes. And the thing is, nobody cared. A few people said congratulations. A couple made jokes about being oblivious for not noticing sooner. But mostly everyone just accepted it and moved on. All that worrying, all that hiding, and in the end, it was fine. The last week of camp was bittersweet. The kids were sad to leave, and honestly, so was I. This place had given me something I hadn't expected to find. Confidence, purpose, and Miles. Especially Miles. On the last night after all the kids had been picked up and the other counselors had left, Miles and I stayed behind to help with final cleanup. We were supposed to leave in the morning, drive back to our separate lives in different cities 3 hours apart. We hadn't talked about what that meant for us, had been carefully avoiding the conversation. But now, sitting on the dock one last time, our feet in the water, we couldn't avoid it anymore. "So," Miles said, "tomorrow." "Yeah," I said. 3 hours isn't that far," he said. "People do long distance all the time." "They do," I agreed. "And I was thinking," he continued, staring out at the water, "maybe this doesn't have to be a summer thing. Maybe it could be a real thing." My chest felt tight with hope and fear. "You want that?" He turned to look at me. "Reed, I've spent the best summer of my life with you." "Yeah, I want that. I want to keep doing this, whatever this is. I want to drive 3 hours to see you on weekends. I want to text you good night when we can't fall asleep talking across our bunk room. I want to figure out what we are when we're not camp counselors." He paused. "But only if you want that too." "I do," I said, and I meant it with everything in me. "I really, really do." He smiled, relieved. "Good, because I already started planning my visit schedule." I laughed and kissed him, there on the dock where we'd spent so many nights talking. The sun was setting, turning the lake gold and pink, and everything felt perfect and possible. "Hey, Miles," I said when we finally pulled apart. "Yeah? I think you should know that I actually don't mind doing laundry that much." He gasped in mock betrayal. "You let me think I was getting the better deal this whole time?" "I wanted an excuse to spend time with you too," I admitted. "We're both idiots," he said fondly. "Yeah," I agreed. "But we're idiots together." We stayed on that dock until the stars came out, making plans and promises. In the morning, we'd pack up and say goodbye to this place that had changed everything. We'd drive away in separate cars, back to our separate lives, but we'd also drive toward something new, something we were building together. As we finally headed back to our cabin for the last time, Miles grabbed my hand and said, "You know what the best part of this summer was?" "What?" "It wasn't the kids, or the campfires, or even the complete lack of laundry duty." He squeezed my hand. "It was finding you." "That's really cheesy," I said, but my voice came out thick with emotion. "I know," he said, "but it's true." And it was. That summer, I went to camp looking for an adventure and found love instead. All because of a chocolate pudding cup and a boy who hated laundry, or at least pretended to. Sometimes the best things in life start with the smallest trades, the simplest offers. You just have to be brave enough to say yes. That night, sleeping in our bunks for the last time, I thought about everything that had happened since that first trade. How a dessert had led to conversations, and conversations had led to friendship, and friendship had led to something deeper. How taking a chance on someone, on something, can change everything. "Miles?" I whispered into the darkness. "Yeah?" "Thank you." "For what?" "For the pudding cup," I said. "For everything." I could hear the smile in his voice when he answered, "Best trade I ever made." And lying there, listening to him breathe across the room, knowing that tomorrow we'd start figuring out how to make this work in the real world, I thought the same thing. Best trade I ever made.